All right, I don't know how many of you are keeping track of what's happening in France with the Yellow Vest movement. Um, but the Yellow Vest movement is about the robbery that the government has been doing for 40 plus years of from the French public, which is the country. And so what you have is a massive disparity in income, and the that disparity is causing issues for the uh, I believe the common one is 50%, but I think there are more reliable sources that are saying it's not 50%. It's more like 60-70% of the working class, and up to and including the moderate up to the moderate middle class. That's the moderate income middle class, and the even the moderate affluent middle class is getting affected. But the bottom 50%, the working class, the blue collar, the the working poor, and the poverty rate of the really poor, who are struggling, even though they're working, and many of them are working more jobs to try to get. And before I go any further, I should point out that there are all these social programs that were covering shortfalls for all for the country, and this was what was helping the working class to have not have the stress and outrage and anger, which is what is exploding currently in France. So, anyways, all these social programs have been cut, and what the French government has just done is given a little bit. And when I say a little bit, I mean really, really, uh, considering the cost of food, the cost of utilities, the cost of fuel, the cost of the rising taxes and everything else. So all the things that Macron and his criminal buddies have done have to put massive burdens on a growing segment of the French public, and many of them are coming from European. Uh, Many of them are coming from the European side, but understand something, that Macron and and his cronies are part of the European government, and they are part of the system that's looking to crush the middle class on whatever level, unless you're in the range of where you're making $250,000 a year, or you're a millionaire, or you're 100 millionaire, or you're a billionaire. You're, these aren't going to these aren't what's happening isn't targeted at them, but for everybody else under the $250,000, that is what it's and it's going equally. So those making six figures, they're not going to feel it as badly, but the pressure is starting to turn on. And right now, the figures, the consistent figure of people of support is 70%. But as I said, just like the other figures, there are more reliable sources that are putting the figures at higher than 70%. Now, understand something. This is the same reason why there's instability in the British and the UK public. These are what they're calling austerity. But basically, the way I like to look at it is alternative is the what I call the criminal alternative uh, um punishing of the populations. So unless you're independently wealthy, everything that's done is to crush your economic and financial stability. So why am I talking about this? Well, it's simple, because now it's starting to spread across Europe. First, it started in France. Now the yellow vests have popped up in Brussels. They're now popping up in Sweden, in Germany. So Brussels is in Bavaria, which is basically, Bavaria and Germany are basically kind of the same, same people, because it's the same group of criminal, lecherous. And when I say not lecherous, I mean financial and everything else. These are not, like the typical lecher is somebody who's old who goes after somebody. Well, these lechers are rich, and they're going after rich, or those backed by the rich who are going after the everybody else. Everybody else that's not in their economic circle. So it's, as I said, it's now in Belgium. It's now in Sweden. It's now in the Netherlands. There are signs that that Brits are paying attention, and the people in the UK are paying attention. So this sort of thing is spreading, and that's because these criminals have gotten so brazenly bad, so outlandishly bad, that it's something that people can't tolerate. Because tolerating means that you won't be able to feed your family, you won't be able to go to your jobs, you won't be able to go on even these little small day escape vacations. You won't be able to do anything. You can't get an education. You can't. So it was there's a gentleman I watch. His name is his name is Professor Richard Wolff, and he's an economist, and he voiced what I have been voicing, is that these people, and it's not just in Europe. It's happening in the U.S., in North America, in Central America. It's happening everywhere, and is that we have a rise of the aristocrats again, and I'm talking about that. So basically, I want to point out something. Only aristocrats, meaning those who are independently wealthy, and those on a higher scale of independently wealthy, who have control and influence of media and politics, as well as policy. They're the ones, and also the one. I'm sorry, and also the ones that can that start corporations and start think tanks and so on and so forth. Those are the ones who can be fascist, because fascism is directly related to how much money, how much influence, how much resources you have. You cannot be a working class person and be a fascist. What you can be is a working class person who listens to the bullshit, who listens to the lies, who buy the criminal mentality of the fascists and back them. Otherwise, working class people cannot be fascists. They can listen and work against themselves by listening to the fascists, who are those who have financial independence, and only those on the top of the top. So, anyways, I'm digressing here. The whole point of this is the United States, the citizens of the United States, where the growing disparity, and the disparity which is bringing about oppression and literally robbing us of our liberty, our ability to live. We need to start a yellow vest protest as well, because yellow vest protests, understand, isn't about what the media has been pushing, that it's about taxes on that happened to be just the trigger, the last trigger to what. So the taxes on fuels, which triggered what was already existing. So even without that, even if it wasn't taxes, even if it was something else, this was the French public had the plural majority of the French public were already on the brink of rebellion. Now they started out being peaceful, showing up on the streets and through social media to say, look, you're pushing us too far. We need you to back off. We need you to give us back and give us a future where we can take care of our own. And what ended up happening is these criminals basically ignoring everything went on and did these oppressive, regressive punishments, unilateral, universal punishments, and so that's what triggered the French public, which even at 70%, that's a huge amount of the country's population to put that sort of strain on. And the thing is as I said, it's spreading across Europe, and I guarantee you it's going to get larger if these austerity programs, which in austerity basically means is a fascist program, and fascism is about stealing the financial viability, the ability of the people to live without overburdened strain. That's fascism in a nutshell. So we have that. So they may put the media might like to use austerity. They may like to use all sorts, but it is fascism. And as I said, if you're working class, and if you're just middle class, you can't be fascist. By definition, you cannot be fascist because you don't have the influence through politics. You don't have the influence through media. You don't have the influence through corporate businesses. You don't have influence through in the education system. You don't have the ability to start institutions such as ALEC, which is funded by the Koch brothers, and many others. And so you basically don't have avenues to try to avenues that you can use to influence the public mind. So you can't be a fascist if you're working class, if you're middle class, unless you are again. I reiterate, unless you are independently wealthy, and only those who have independent wealth reaching stratospheric levels, like Jeff Bezos, like the Koch brothers, like the Betsy DeVosses, or you are like the Macrons with connections to Rothschild banking, and the Rothschilds have been one of the biggest players in global instability. And global instability means that they've had every negative. They have been involved with everything that's ever happened negatively that's in our conscious minds. So all the nastiness that's happened, the Rothschilds being one of those fascists who have had the influence to cause all the negative aspects that have happened. Vietnam War, okay? The Spanish-American War, the U.S. Civil War, the World War I, World War II. So now I mentioned just Rothschilds because they're one of the most famous and notorious. But there are more. The Rockefellers, another name, another famous name. What's the one that gray-haired guy who's on NBC or ABC? I forget what he's one of their television pundits. God, I can't think of that. I can't think of that. Oh, the Vanderbilts. The Vanderbilts. If you have a home on the Hamptons, if you have a home in some of those other places like the Hamptons across the world, and they're not just homes; they're vacation homes. So, if you have that ability and you have multiple multi-million-dollar homes, then you can be a fascist because you have the financial independence to do that. And that is what the Rothschilds, the Vanderbilts, the Rockefellers, and all of these, and interestingly enough, the DW, it's Dutch Wells, did a great piece on a guy in this guy in Germany, and his family is inherited wealth from way back, who have ties with the Rothschilds, but these you haven't heard about him because he keeps in the background. But he owns 300 acres of virgin forest, passed down from his family. Now, he has the independent wealth, and he actually does shadow banking to fund others like him. So when they go looking for money, okay, and oftentimes when they're talking about money, they're talking about influence among these stratospheric financial criminals. He's part of it. I can't think of the guy's name, but he's either in Bavaria or Germany, one of those. But all these people go back to a lot of these people go back to the time of the Roman Empire. And they were the aristocrats and nobility. So, again, I do all this to make you understand. You cannot be a fascist. You can be the one that takes the orders. You can be the grunts. Okay? And you can be the ones that are influenced by the propaganda, by using race issues and other stuff. So you can be a follower, but you cannot be a fascist. You just don't have the financial independence to influence and buy everything that's needed, the structures that are needed. So what we need is a yellow vest in this country. But we need that yellow vest, and I diverged on all that. I apologize. But basically what I was trying to say is we need a yellow vest movement, but we need a yellow vest movement that's global. So we need to put on the yellow vest. We need to back what's happening in Europe, okay? But we also need to include climate change, justice, and equality. All right, but we also need to do what we also need to do is include nuclear issues. So nuclear power and nuclear weapons, because those are both tied in. Nuclear waste is a huge problem. It's not covered in the media, and it's not talked about in the quote unquote higher education system, because nuclear waste it is a huge issue. The last report I heard is like there's like 2,500, I think, and I could be wrong about the 2,500. It may be a little less, but we have nuclear waste going into 2,500 super sites all across the country. They're also in the territories. All right, they're not even being put into underground bunkers, deep underground bunkers, and they're not being put into lead-lined barrels. They're being dumped. For instance, like in wetlands in Massachusetts. I mean, the vast majority of and those wetlands in Massachusetts are surrounded by the moderately affluent middle class towns and populations. But the vast majority of these super sites are, in fact, where minorities and those of the working class, and the working class includes white working class people, that's where it's being put in. And if you are just the middle class and you're making like 50, you're making like 50, 70, 80, 90,000 or $100,000, guess what? That's middle class, and those are going in those areas as well. So, and it's not just nuclear waste. There's arsenic. Okay, there's arsenic that's going in there. There's also from all those asbestos cleanups. The asbestos is going in there, and they're not doing a very good job of making sure that this stuff is put away where it can't come out into the environment and cause and start saturating places. And add to that all the other pollutions that these fascists, and that's what it is. Fascism also includes being able to ignore everything, and basically commit crimes willy-nilly because they have that influence. Fascism doesn't mean mean armies of rabid insane people. Okay, with these cartoonish insanity. No, no. Fascism is often done in the open, and it is through suppression. That's what a fascism is. It's not a. It's not about. It's not about armies. It's not about causing physical harm. Fascism is about doing things in the shadows and having the control. And the only reason that only reason why fascism is viewed the way it is because fascism requires those who are fascists require suppression because their wanton criminality, their wanton destruction is caught, and it starts to leak out, and more people start to hear about it, and so fascists have to use the gullible peons. Okay, and so they have to throw in. So they have to go in through the old tropes of racism, of immigration, about everything else. They have to talk about economy, the stock market. They have to do whatever and anything to try to get people not to listen. And listen, not to listen to this is because people would find common cause and common reason. Fascism is about going against the common law. Fascism is about going against the common good. So, so the whole point is that we need a yellow vest movement, but we need a yellow vest movement that has to be very forceful, and we need to make sure that all of them get the point, because the French want financial equity and security, but they also want but they also understand that the government can't be trusted, but and they want Macron to resign. But this is where I part with the French people, because it's not enough to force someone who falsely ran. And and there's actually a lot of confusion that as I understand it, of how he actually got into the presidency for the French. Just like the Republicans in this country are taking action to limit the power of incoming Democrats, and it's also the same way the Democrats went to suppress Bernie Sanders, and what they're doing with what they did with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and what they're doing with that's fascism, people. All of it is fascism. How the Kochs funded a thing to try to funded a I can't think of the word, but they basically funded this research that tried to poo-poo the idea of Medicare for all, and tried to make it look bad, but that's also fascism. Because, again, if you have the money, you have the influence, you can bribe the right people, you can buy the media companies that spread the propaganda, and then they call it news, or suppress, such as what the guy from the National Enquirer did, suppressing stories that would affect Trump's elections, viability, that's fascism. And why? Because he has the money, he could buy the stories, he could quash it. That's fascism. When the news doesn't talk about something, that's fascism. When the news skews, spins, or use whataboutism or anything, all the other stuff, and they don't use objective, contextual, and common sense, okay, and pointing out obvious, and goes against the common interest, again, we come down to the common laws, that's fascism. All of it that makes sure that the plural majority has to just take it. That's fascism. That's fascism. I mean, fascism. And only those on top, only those who have the money, who therefore have the resources to be able to influence education, to influence politics, influence what you buy, where they can dump their waste, so they don't have to pay to properly clean up the waste. Those who can dictate rules, ridiculous rules, criminal rules that go against common law, that restrict you by putting on regulations that are just blatantly go against common law and go and affect the plural majority. That's fascism. Now, libertarians are, in my opinion, the libertarians haven't thought it out well, and that they are contributing and allowing the fascist, and again, fascists have control. They are helping and enabling the fascists to do the work. And so the libertarians, a lot of their thinking helps and enables these fascists to carry out things that affect the common good. And the thing is, as I said, if you have control, because you have money, that's fascism. So regulations, we do need regulations, but it has to be regulations that are for the common good. You have a regulation that says, "Oh, you need to be able to, you need a permit so you can start something like a kids camp," and you throw in, "Oh, it's because of liability and it's because of the." That's my father does something called kids camp in Canton, Massachusetts, and it's basically what it is during the summertime they spend I think a couple of weeks where kids from Canton can come to do different activities and different arts and crafts, but they put these things that you need permits for this. You need permits for that. You need permits for this. You need I mean, they need to get a permit for a dunk tank. That's fascism. Okay, those are sort of regulations that are not necessary. All right, and fascism will make it so. And the reason why the premise is so that they can get money. All right, and the reason why towns need these sort of monies through these permits is because they're bleeding off that money to people who already have a lot of money on the top. And the media will spin it as, oh, it's you have a bunch of stupid people, when they're just spending money recklessly. But that's not the case, because what it is it is what we hear about every single time we see a movie or a TV show about organized crime, the mafia and so on and so forth. Or you have or you have some sort of accountant doing it. And they label it embezzlement. But basically, embezzlement is happening across every town, every village, every hamlet, and it's going to people who don't need it. That's fascism. So it's anytime somebody who has more money, okay, versus the plural majority, and has the influence to do legally bribe, legally embezzle, and control the narrative. That's fascism. That's fascism 101. So, but when it comes to regulations, like, that we shouldn't have super sites that are put in where we have extremely dangerous substances being thrown willy-nilly with only a veneer of security, meaning how or safety, but not security, safety, veneer of safety, and the media puts it out or does not report upon it. That's fascism. So when we have regulations on these issues, such as we can't be having these super sites, and then if we're gonna bury things, okay, and if we're gonna bury things, damn well make sure that it's buried and it's gonna stay buried, and it's not gonna come to bite us in our collective common good. And the thing is so when the media or a town or are telling you, oh, it's going to cost all this and all this and all that, and so it will raise it. Okay, that's fascism. All propaganda is fascism, and all propaganda is done by those who have the money. You can have a small group, a collective, who can be fascist because they have the money, but they also have a larger, but still a small number. But all these, they always work together. They're always in cahoots. And you'll have media and others that say, "Oh, well, they have this agreement that." But when the core outlining principle of where they want and what they want is the same, is there any difference? No. So, anyways, I completely hashed this up. Basically, the whole thing is we need a yellow vest. We need to stand in solidarity with the yellow vesters, and we need to go out there and do a yellow vest protest. And we, meaning as many of us as possible, we need to go out there every weekend and do this. All right, bye.